think through them, take our lips and speak through them, take our hearts and set them on fire with love for you. Amen. All right, let's sing that. 2 feeding stories this morning, and I just got back from vacation. There was a lot of feeding going on. Whenever you're with family, there are always lots of meals, and we had some wonderful family meals. But one especially stands out for me. Many of you know Jim, my ex-husband, father of the children. He's been here many times. It was his birthday that week, and so we had a family party over at his house, and everybody made something, even Jim, because he just can't stand to not cook if everybody else is cooking too. So he taught Paul, our son, how to make jambalaya, which is a very traditional Louisiana dish and one often that the man in the family makes. And somebody had given me some ground venison, I brought that, and then he had some other things, and we threw all that together. And then everybody else made things too. Our son made some jalapeno cornbread, our daughter and son-in-law brought something. Rita wasn't there, she had to stay at work in Maryland, but it was the only one of the kids that wasn't there. And a couple that's a really close friend of ours, it's more like family than friends, they came, they brought something too. And the 2 little granddaughters, the 9-year-old and the 7-year-old, made some decorations. And you know, you might have expected that the 7-year-old wouldn't have done as much as the 9-year-old, but Rowan, the 7-year-old, is really into art, and her mother has this new art studio. So she spent the entire week before making presents for Pawpaw. So by the time she got to the party, she had a box that was this big with about 25 presents she had made over the course of the week. And each one of the presents was wrapped in a piece of fabric and tied with either a belt or a ribbon or some kind of thing from the studio that she had picked up. And she had made this cat out of paper boxes that was this big. It was a giant cat. So when she kind of came in with all these things, we thought, well, we'll do this first. So we got started on that. And Jim, you know, he said later, he said, I felt like a little boy on Christmas, you know, because taking these things out of the box and unwrapping them. And all of us, all the adults, got into it as much as Rowan and Fiona were into it. And every time her pawpaw unwrapped something, Rowan would go, oh, like she had never seen it before, even though she made it. So it was wonderful. And you know, there was not only enough food to go around, but there was more food than we needed. We ate cornbread for, I think, 3 days afterwards. There was not only enough joy, there was more than enough joy. And that's what the 2 feeding stories are about today. It's about that in the first one, where we hear from the prophet Elisha. It's about a community surrounding Elisha that has been in famine. You remember who Elisha is? He was the disciple, the student of Elijah, the prophet Elijah. And when Elijah was going to be taken up into the heavens in the chariot, Elisha asked him to give him a double portion of the spirit that God had given Elijah. And Elisha says, if you see me going into the heavens on the chariot, then know that you have it. And of course, that's what happened. And so Elisha succeeds Elijah. And he is the prophet who, when some member of the community comes to him and says, I know we have no food, but I have these 20 loaves and some extra grain, and I don't know what to do with it. And the prophet Elisha says, God is with us. God will make this enough. Give it to everybody. And then the man that brings it says, but there are 100 people out here. This isn't nearly enough. And Elisha says, God will make it enough. And they give it. And it's not only enough, it's more than enough. And we hear that same story done again by Jesus, who at that time they thought also was a prophet like Elijah or Elisha. That's what it says in John's scripture anyway, that they saw the prophet do this, meaning Jesus, and thought the prophet had returned, probably thinking that Elijah had returned at that point. And in that case, 5,000 are fed with just a few fish, a few loaves of bread. And the common thing in both stories is that the way God chose to feed the people involved the whole community. Those who needed to be fed as well as those who were doing the feeding. All were involved in handing things out and taking things up. These stories are often heard by us in the church, with an ear towards what we need to do for those in need in our own communities, whether it's literal feeding with food, or whether it's providing fresh water in a place that needs water, or whether it's clothing, or whether it's school supplies, or whatever. We hear it with that ear, and rightly so. But sometimes we miss a part of it. We miss a part of it about how God acts. He acted through the participation of the whole community, not just those who had, but also those who didn't have participated in the handing out and the feeding of the community. There is a Presbyterian, I think he's a minister, but I'm not sure, he's at least a lay minister, he may be an ordained minister. His name's Robert Lupton. He's written a book called Toxic Charity. And it is a book that is meant to call attention to people like him and to people like us who take to heart the fact that we are supposed to reach out to people in need, but to realize maybe that we need to begin to think about the most helpful way to reach out and not always the most convenient way to reach out. He draws a distinction between toxic charity and non-toxic charity in saying that toxic charity is whenever we do for somebody something that they could do for themselves, or when we do for a group of people something that they could do for themselves. And in doing that, we take away their self-esteem, we take away their ownership of the community. We make a distinction between we who have doing something that we want to do for somebody who doesn't have. And he tells two stories in the book. He tells more than that, but two that struck me right off. They both have to do with water, which is a little like feeding. And in one, it was his own church. And he had organized a mission team, and they went to a little village in a little Honduran village. And they had already decided that they were going to make a commitment to this village. This wasn't going to be just a quick mission trip. They were going to spend some time with the villagers, and they were going to come back over the next several years. And so they went, they spent a few weeks, and it was very evident immediately that one of the things the village needed was water, because the women were carrying these big jugs miles and miles and miles down to a river, which was the source of their water, and then miles and miles and miles back. And so he and his team thought, well, we can fix this. This is something we can easily fix. We know engineers back home that we can bring over. They can drill a well. They can make this a lot easier, bring this a lot closer where these women don't have to do that. And so they did that. The church paid for it all. It was a big church. The church brought these people over that were experts in the United States. They went in there. They built the well. When the first water was pumped to the service, there was a giant celebration in the village. And then the mission team went home. And the next year when they came back, they were going down that dusty road to the village, and they looked out, and lo and behold, there were these women with water jugs walking miles and miles and miles down to the river to get their water, and miles and miles and miles back. And they wondered what happened. So they got to the village, and they discovered the pump had broken. And of course, nobody knew how to fix the pump, and the church had put in the well anyway, so they didn't even know it was really maybe their well, but they'd been waiting for the church to come back. So the church came back, they fixed the pump, everybody was happy, they left again, the next year came back, and yep, same thing. Pump had broken again, and the women were back to just walking the miles to the water. Because you see, the haves in the church had simply come and done for the have-nots there. They didn't involve them in the planning of the well. They didn't show them how to do the pump. They just came and felt really good about putting this well in and this pump in. And they felt really good about fixing it every time it was broken. But the people of the village never had any ownership in the pump. Well, Lupton compares this to another story of another group who dealt with a similar problem in Nicaragua. And this group was also a mission group. But instead of going in and just doing all this thing for the village, they put their money together and they hired a community developer. And they sent the community developer over to the village. And the community developer, over a period of months, met with the villagers. And together with the villagers, they all planned a plan for a well and how that would work. And they all looked and found a reliable Nicaraguan engineer to bring in to do the drilling. And the men of the village dug trenches because part of their plan, when they planned it themselves, was to have the water really go to their homes. And so they dug trenches and they laid pipe and they put in meters and they put in some of their savings, as well as the people from the benefactor group putting in a lot of more money, obviously, than they did, but each person in the town, the village, put in some of their money as well. And there was a big celebration, not only because they had a well and water, they had a whole business. She had helped them see how to set prices, how to put meters in. They were paying for their own water, and they not only had enough water, they had more than enough, and were in negotiations with a nearby village to partner with that village in the well as well. The people were proud of their business, and they had not just a well that was going to break down each year and wait for benefactors to come fix. They had a profit-making business that was helping to bring life and money into the whole community. Do you see the difference? One takes a lot more time, so maybe it even takes a lot more money. Isn't quite as glamorous as taking your mission team over for a Honduran experience. And yet was more what the people of the village needed in Nicaragua than what the people of the village needed in the other place. It's something that we need to pay attention to, because when God feeds, God brings the whole community in, not just the part of the community that has, giving the have-nots, so the have-nots stay as have-nots and the haves stay as haves. But people taking time to work with people and getting their own ideas and hearing what they really need and helping them to do what they need to do and can do. In our own communities, we still have that need. Now, sometimes there's a need for what Lupton calls crisis response. A tsunami comes through, an earthquake, a hurricane, and then people really can't help themselves for a while, and you need to go in and provide what they need. And then we have people in our communities that are old and don't have enough money to make the ends meet, and they need us to help provide what they need. And people that are mentally challenged and people that are physically challenged that need us to provide what they need. But we also have people who have been so beat down by the system that they don't have any self-esteem left. And they may need food and they may need clothes, but they also need the privilege of being taken seriously. They need people to spend time with them. They need people to mentor them. The Wells program of helping people to do their taxes is a great program of mentoring on a group basis, where volunteers don't do taxes for people, but they help them do their own taxes. What a wonderful program. They're helping people get back their own money, just that we take for granted in knowing how to do. And yet these people now are learning how to do that themselves and having access through the well to computers to help them do that online. It's a great mentoring program. Mentoring programs can be in groups, they can be individuals, one individual working with another individual to help bring that individual along. And there are many other ways, but it requires us seeing the feeding as God showed us through Elisha and Jesus. God didn't just wave a magic wand and provide food in the famine. God worked with the community and with what the community was willing to give, even though it seemed like a little. And it was all of them working together that made that little bit be not only enough, but more than enough. It was Jesus working through with a crowd of 5,000, with what they had and God's blessing and power on it. So as we look at these passages, and as we hear the call to us to feed the communities that need feeding, whether it's spiritually, physically, with food, with water, with jobs, with whatever, we need to remember that the community aspect of it is important. That's what's most important, is to involve people who are capable of helping them to see what they need and helping them to have the resources and work through the systems to get what they need with their help, with their input. Not quite as glamorous, but oh so powerful. And every time we do it, what may seem like a little will not only be enough, it will be more than enough.